In the vast tapestry of Islamic teachings, the question of same-gender relationships occupies a unique and challenging space. This exploration begins with the foundational scriptural sources of Islam, the Quran and the Hadith. The Quran, considered the literal word of God by Muslims, provides explicit guidance on a myriad of issues, including human relationships. Verses such as those in Surah Al-A'raf 7:80-81 and Surah An-Naml 27:54-55 recount the story of the people of Lot, whose actions of engaging in same-gender sexual relations were condemned by God. These verses are often cited to support the view that such relationships are against divine ordinance. Furthermore, Hadith literature, which records the sayings and actions of Prophet Muhammad, reinforces these scriptural positions. Several Hadith narrate the Prophet's disapproval of same-gender sexual relations, emphasizing that such acts are sinful and deviate from the path prescribed by God. The Quranic story of the people of Lut is particularly significant in this context. According to Islamic tradition, the people of Lut lived in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and were engaged in various forms of moral corruption, including same-gender sexual relations. Prophet Lut was sent by God to guide them back to the path of righteousness, but his warnings went unheeded. As a result, God decreed a severe punishment upon them, destroying their cities as a demonstration of his disapproval of their actions. This narrative is frequently referenced in discussions about same-gender relationships in Islam, illustrating the perceived gravity of such acts and the divine retribution that follows. The Hadith literature further elaborates on these scriptural foundations. Numerous sayings of the Prophet Muhammad highlight the prohibition of same-gender sexual acts. For instance, one Hadith states, "When a man mounts another man, the throne of God shakes." Another Hadith mentions, "Cursed is he who does what the people of Lut did." These sayings underscore the severity with which same-gender sexual acts are viewed in Islam and reinforce the Quranic teachings on this matter. Moving from the texts to their interpretations, Islamic scholars have historically agreed on the prohibition of same-gender relationships. Classical scholars like Imam al-Ghazali and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah have expounded on the destructive nature of such acts, not just in a physical or social sense, but in their deviation from spiritual purity and divine will. These interpretations have been preserved and propagated through centuries, forming a consistent theological stance across various Islamic traditions. Imam al-Ghazali, one of the most prominent Islamic theologians, argued that same-gender sexual acts violate the natural order and the divine wisdom behind human creation. He emphasized that such acts are inherently unnatural and disrupt the balance intended by God. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, another influential scholar, echoed these sentiments, stressing that same-gender relationships are a deviation from the path of righteousness and lead to spiritual and moral decay. Their writings have significantly influenced Islamic jurisprudence and ethical thought, shaping the collective understanding of same-gender relationships in the Muslim world. Central to understanding Islamic views on human relationships is the concept of fitra, which refers to the inherent nature and disposition with which humans are created. In Islamic theology, fitra encompasses the innate qualities and instincts bestowed upon humans by God, including the natural inclination towards heterosexual relationships. This belief posits that God created men and women with complementary natures, designed for mutual attraction and procreation. The union of a man and a woman in marriage is seen as fulfilling the divine purpose of human creation, ensuring the continuation of human life and the nurturing of future generations. Fitra is a fundamental concept in Islam, representing the pure, uncorrupted state in which humans are created. It encompasses the natural instincts and inclinations that guide humans towards righteous behavior and adherence to God's commandments. The concept of fitra is closely linked to the belief that God's creation is perfect, and that any deviation from this natural order represents a form of corruption or moral decay. From this perspective, same-gender relationships are viewed as a deviation from the natural order established by God. Islamic teachings emphasize that adhering to fitra is essential for spiritual well-being and harmony within the individual and society. The perceived disruption of this natural order by engaging in same-gender relationships is therefore seen as a rejection of divine wisdom and an impediment to achieving spiritual and moral fulfillment. Islamic teachings on fitra also highlight the importance of maintaining the purity of this natural state. Acts that are considered to deviate from fitra, such as same-gender sexual relations, are seen as corrupting the innate purity with which humans are created. This perspective underscores the belief that following God's commandments and adhering to the natural order is essential for achieving spiritual fulfillment and attaining a state of moral integrity. The emphasis on fitra in Islamic thought reinforces the view that same-gender relationships are fundamentally at odds with the divine purpose of human creation. The historical context of Islamic views on same-gender relationships reveals a complex and nuanced picture. Throughout Islamic history, attitudes towards such relationships have varied across different cultures and eras. In some Islamic civilizations, there were periods of relative tolerance and subtle acknowledgement of same-gender attractions, often reflected in literature and art. However, these cultural expressions did not translate into acceptance of same-gender relationships as legitimate or morally permissible within the framework of Islamic law and theology. During the Abbasid Caliphate, for example, same-gender attractions were occasionally depicted in poetry and literature, reflecting a certain level of cultural acknowledgement. Poets like Abu Nuwas wrote openly about their experiences and attractions, suggesting that same-gender relationships were not entirely hidden from public view. However, despite this cultural acknowledgement, the legal and theological stance on same-gender relationships remained consistent with traditional Islamic teachings. Islamic legal systems derived from Sharia have consistently prohibited same-gender sexual acts. Punishments for such acts have varied, ranging from severe penalties to more lenient social sanctions, depending on the historical and cultural context. Despite occasional periods of tolerance, the overarching narrative within Islamic jurisprudence has remained one of prohibition, rooted in the belief that such acts contradict divine law and disrupt societal order. Throughout different Islamic dynasties and regions, the enforcement of these prohibitions varied. In some periods and places, same-gender relationships were met with severe punishments, while in others, they were more leniently addressed, often depending on the prevailing cultural and political climate. However, the underlying theological and legal principles remained unchanged, reflecting a consistent disapproval of same-gender relationships within the framework of Islamic teachings. The ethical and moral frameworks in Islam are deeply intertwined with the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith. Islamic ethics emphasize the importance of living a life in accordance with God's commandments, which are believed to lead to personal and communal well-being. The purpose of human sexuality, according to Islamic teachings, is not only for procreation, but also for fostering love, mercy, and companionship between spouses. This union is considered a reflection of God's wisdom and a means to attain spiritual fulfillment. The role of the family in Islam cannot be overstated. The family is regarded as the cornerstone of a stable and moral society, with the marital bond between a man and a woman serving as its foundation. This bond is not only a means of fulfilling individual desires, but also a divine institution intended for procreation, nurturing children, and providing a stable environment for their upbringing. Islamic teachings emphasize that children are a blessing from God, and their upbringing in a stable, loving family is seen as a fundamental responsibility of Muslim parents. From an ethical standpoint, same-gender relationships are seen as failing to fulfill these divine purposes. The inability to procreate within such relationships is viewed as a significant deviation from the natural and intended use of human sexuality. Additionally, Islamic ethics stress the importance of modesty and chastity, virtues that are believed to be compromised by engaging in same-gender sexual acts. Scholars argue that preserving these virtues is essential for maintaining moral integrity and social harmony. The prohibition of same-gender relationships is thus closely linked to the Islamic emphasis on the family. The traditional family structure, with its clear roles and responsibilities, is viewed as the ideal environment for raising children and ensuring the continuity of the community and faith. Same-gender relationships, by their nature, do not conform to this model, leading to concerns about their impact on the stability and continuity of the family and, by extension, society. The prohibition of same-gender relationships in Islam is rooted in a complex interplay of scriptural teachings, theological principles, historical interpretations, ethical considerations, and the centrality of the family. These elements combine to form a coherent and consistent stance within the Islamic tradition, reflecting a deep-seated belief in the importance of adhering to divine guidance and preserving the natural order established by God. Through this lens, the prohibition is seen not as a mere doctrinal position, but as a vital aspect of maintaining spiritual and moral integrity, social harmony, and the well-being of the individual and community. Islamic ethics and morality play a crucial role in shaping views on human behavior, including sexuality and relationships. The ethical framework within Islam is deeply rooted in the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith, which provide guidance on how Muslims should conduct their lives in a manner that is pleasing to God. This ethical framework emphasizes the importance of living a life in accordance with divine commandments, which are believed to lead to personal and communal well-being. In this context, human sexuality is seen not merely as a physical act, but as a profound expression of love, mercy, and companionship between spouses. It is within this marital union that the ethical and moral purposes of human sexuality are fulfilled. In Islam, the primary purpose of human sexuality is procreation. The Quran states, "And Allah has made for you from your homes a place of rest, and made for you from your mates children and grandchildren, and provided for you from the good things." Quran 16:72. This verse highlights the importance of procreation as a divine purpose of human creation. The ability to bring forth new life is seen as a sacred responsibility and a manifestation of God's creative power. Within this framework, same-gender relationships are viewed as inherently incapable of fulfilling this divine purpose, as they do not result in procreation. Moreover, Islamic teachings stress the importance of modesty and chastity, virtues that are considered essential for maintaining moral integrity and social harmony. The Quran instructs, "Tell the believing men to lower their gaze and be modest. That is purer for them. Verily, Allah is aware of what they do." Quran 24:30. This emphasis on modesty is reflected in the prohibition of same-gender sexual acts, which are seen as compromising these virtues. Engaging in such acts is viewed as a deviation from the path of righteousness and a violation of the ethical and moral principles that underpin Islamic teachings. The role of the family in Islam cannot be overstated. The family is regarded as the cornerstone of a stable and moral society, with the marital bond between a man and a woman serving as its foundation. The Quran describes marriage as a sign of God's grace, and of His signs is that He created for you from yourselves mates, that you may find tranquility in them, and He placed between you affection and mercy. Indeed, in that are signs for a people who give thought. Quran 30:21. This verse underscores the divine nature of the marital relationship and its role in providing emotional and spiritual support. The traditional family structure is seen as the ideal environment for raising children and ensuring their proper upbringing. Children are considered a blessing from God, and their nurturing within a stable, loving family is viewed as a fundamental responsibility of Muslim parents. The Quran states, "O you who have believed, protect yourselves and your families from a fire whose fuel is people and stones." Quran 66.6. This verse highlights the importance of safeguarding the moral and spiritual well-being of one's family. From this perspective, same-gender relationships are seen as fundamentally at odds with the Islamic emphasis on the family. The inability to procreate within such relationships is viewed as a significant deviation from the natural and intended use of human sexuality. Additionally, same-gender relationships are perceived as undermining the traditional family structure, which is seen as essential for maintaining social stability and moral order. Scholars argue that preserving the traditional family structure is crucial for the continuity of the community and faith. The psychological and social considerations of same-gender relationships are also addressed within Islamic thought. Islamic scholars argue that same-gender relationships can have negative psychological and social consequences for individuals and communities. From a psychological standpoint, engaging in same-gender sexual acts is seen as leading to spiritual and moral decay. The belief is that such acts disrupt the natural order established by God and result in feelings of guilt and shame, which can have detrimental effects on an individual's mental and emotional well-being. Socially, same-gender relationships are viewed as potentially destabilizing to the community. Islamic teachings emphasize the importance of maintaining social harmony and cohesion, which are believed to be threatened by behaviors that deviate from divine commandments. The Quran warns against following desires that lead to corruption and disorder. And if the truth had followed their desires, the heavens and the earth and whoever is in them would have been ruined. Rather, we have brought them their reminder, but they, from their reminder, are turning away. Quran 23:71. This verse underscores the belief that adhering to divine guidance is essential for preserving social order and preventing moral decay. In addition to these psychological and social considerations, Islamic teachings also highlight the importance of compassion and empathy in addressing the issue of same-gender relationships. While the prohibition of such relationships is clear, Islam also emphasizes the principles of mercy and understanding. The Quran repeatedly reminds believers of God's mercy and encourages them to embody these qualities in their interactions with others. For instance, the Quran states, "And my mercy encompasses all things." Quran 7:156. This emphasis on mercy and compassion suggests that Muslims should approach individuals who experience same-gender attractions with empathy and respect, while upholding the ethical and moral teachings of Islam. In navigating the complex issue of same-gender relationships, it is important to consider the broader context of Islamic ethics and morality. The prohibition of such relationships is not merely a doctrinal position, but is deeply rooted in the belief that adhering to divine guidance is essential for achieving spiritual fulfillment and maintaining social harmony. By understanding the ethical and moral principles that underpin Islamic teachings, Muslims can better appreciate the reasons behind the prohibition of same-gender relationships and strive to uphold these values in their lives. Ultimately, the Islamic view on same-gender relationships is shaped by a combination of scriptural teachings, theological principles, historical interpretations, ethical considerations, and the centrality of the family. These elements form a coherent and consistent stance within the Islamic tradition, reflecting a deep-seated belief in the importance of adhering to divine guidance and preserving the natural order established by God. Through this lens, the prohibition is seen as a vital aspect of maintaining spiritual and moral integrity, social harmony, and the well-being of the individual and community. To provide a broader context, it is important to compare Islamic teachings on same-gender relationships with those of other major world religions. Each faith tradition has its own theological, ethical, and social perspectives that shape its views on human sexuality and relationships. By examining these perspectives, we can gain a deeper understanding of the similarities and differences that exist across religious boundaries and the unique aspects of the Islamic stance on same-gender relationships. In Christianity, views on same-gender relationships vary widely among different denominations and traditions. The Bible, like the Quran, contains passages that have been interpreted as condemning same-gender sexual acts. For instance, Leviticus 18:22 states, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination." Similarly, in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul writes in Romans 1:26-27 about same-gender relations as contrary to natural order. However, there is significant diversity in how these texts are interpreted and applied. Some Christian denominations, such as the Roman Catholic Church and many evangelical Protestant groups, maintain a traditional view that same-gender relationships are morally unacceptable. In contrast, other denominations, such as the Episcopal Church and the United Church of Christ, have embraced more inclusive interpretations, recognizing and blessing same-gender marriages and ordaining openly LGBTQ+ clergy. Judaism also presents a range of perspectives on same-gender relationships. Orthodox Judaism generally adheres to a traditional interpretation of the Torah, which includes prohibitions against same-gender sexual acts, similar to those found in Christianity and Islam. However, within conservative and Reform Judaism, there has been a significant shift towards acceptance and inclusion of LGBTQ+ individuals. These branches have reinterpreted traditional texts and developed new halakhic, Jewish legal frameworks that support same-gender relationships and marriages. Hinduism, with its diverse and pluralistic nature, does not have a single authoritative text or doctrine that addresses same-gender relationships. Hindu scriptures contain stories and references that can be interpreted in various ways. Some ancient texts, like the Kama Sutra, acknowledge the existence of same-gender love and relationships. Modern Hindu perspectives on same-gender relationships vary widely, with some Hindu leaders and organizations advocating for acceptance, and others maintaining traditional views on sexuality and marriage. In Buddhism, the approach to same-gender relationships can differ depending on cultural and doctrinal contexts. The Buddha's teachings do not explicitly address same-gender relationships, but the emphasis on compassion, non-harm, and the ethical precepts can be interpreted to support acceptance and respect for LGBTQ+ individuals. Many contemporary Buddhist teachers and communities, particularly in the West, have embraced inclusive attitudes towards same-gender relationships, while more conservative traditions may hold different views. As we navigate the modern era, issues of sexuality and gender are increasingly discussed in public and academic forums. The Muslim world is not immune to these debates, and contemporary discussions about same-gender relationships reflect a wide range of opinions and experiences. Within the Muslim community, there are differing views among scholars, activists, and laypeople, leading to an ongoing and dynamic conversation about the intersection of faith, identity, and modern societal values. Some contemporary Muslim scholars and activists advocate for a re-examination of traditional interpretations of Quranic verses and hadith related to same-gender relationships. They argue that historical and cultural contexts must be considered, and that a more inclusive and compassionate understanding of Islamic teachings is possible. These voices often emphasize the importance of justice, mercy, and the inherent dignity of all individuals, calling for greater acceptance and support for LGBTQ+ Muslims. Conversely, many traditional scholars and religious leaders maintain that the prohibition of same-gender relationships is a clear and unchanging aspect of Islamic teachings. They argue that the Quran and Hadith provide unequivocal guidance on this issue, and that upholding these teachings is essential for preserving the integrity of the faith and the moral fabric of society. This perspective emphasizes the importance of adhering to divine commandments and the belief that any deviation from these teachings is a threat to spiritual and social well-being. The role of Islamic law, Sharia, is central to this discussion. Sharia provides guidelines for personal conduct and societal norms derived from the Quran, Hadith, and centuries of jurisprudence. Within this framework, legal rulings, fatwas on same-gender relationships, have historically been consistent in their prohibition. However, the application of these rulings can vary widely depending on the legal and cultural context of different Muslim-majority countries. In some countries, same-gender relationships are criminalized and subject to severe penalties, reflecting a strict interpretation of Sharia. In others, there may be a more lenient approach, with same-gender relationships not explicitly criminalized but still socially stigmatized. The diversity in the application of Sharia highlights the complex interplay between religious teachings, legal systems, and cultural norms in different contexts. Despite the doctrinal stance, Islam emphasizes compassion, mercy, and understanding. These principles can play a crucial role in how Muslims approach the issue of same-gender relationships. The Quran repeatedly reminds believers of God's mercy and encourages them to embody these qualities in their interactions with others. For example, the Quran states, "And my mercy encompasses all things." Quran 7:156. This emphasis on mercy and compassion suggests that Muslims should approach individuals who experience same-gender attractions with empathy and respect, even while upholding the ethical and moral teachings of Islam. Balancing doctrinal beliefs with the principles of kindness and justice is essential for fostering a compassionate and inclusive community. Muslims are encouraged to engage in respectful dialogue and to seek understanding of different perspectives. By doing so, they can create a supportive environment that honors both their faith and the dignity of every individual. This approach can help bridge the gap between traditional teachings and the realities of contemporary life, allowing for a more nuanced and empathetic understanding of same-gender relationships. In conclusion, the discussion of same-gender relationships in Islam is multifaceted, involving scriptural interpretation, theological principles, historical context, ethical considerations, and contemporary debates. By exploring these dimensions, we can gain a deeper understanding of the reasons behind the Islamic stance on same-gender relationships and the ongoing dialogue within the Muslim community and beyond. This comprehensive approach allows for a more informed and compassionate engagement with this complex and sensitive issue, reflecting the diverse and dynamic nature of Islamic thought and practice.